I said we're full. The words landed flat and sharp, like a menu tossed on the floor. The white waitress didn't blink when she said it, didn't lower her voice, didn't look Raina in the eye. She just turned her head and walked off, apron swaying behind her, pretending not to notice the 5 empty tables in plain view. Raina remained at the host stand, fingers laced around the strap of her small cream handbag. She wore a white silk blouse, perfectly pressed, tucked neatly into high-waisted tan trousers. Gold bangles shimmered on her wrist. Her locks were pulled into a low chignon. Her makeup soft, intentional. She looked like someone who belonged everywhere, but apparently not here. A couple glanced up from their espresso in the corner. A young man near the bar frowned into his menu. A server across the room gave a long, deliberate side-eye before quickly pretending to straighten cutlery. Raina took a slow breath. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but not timid. "I see open tables," she said calmly. The waitress turned back, resting one hand on her hip. "They're reserved." Raina raised one brow slightly. "Didn't say that on the website. It said walk-ins welcome." A smile bloomed on the waitress's lips, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind that peeled sideways, thin, theatrical, empty. "Well, we must have just filled up, sweetheart." Raina's jaw tightened, but she didn't move. "I don't want any trouble," she said evenly. The waitress snorted. "Then maybe try somewhere more your vibe." The last 2 words floated, poisonous. A soft gasp came from a woman at the back booth. Raina didn't respond. Not yet. Her hands didn't tremble, her stance didn't change. She'd been here before, not in this restaurant, not in this neighborhood, but in this moment. The one where dignity was a threat, where silence felt like surrender and speaking up would be called attitude. She turned her head slightly, scanning the restaurant. Open seats, clean plates, staff joking quietly in a corner. Not full. Not even close. "I'd like to speak to the manager," she said. The waitress didn't flinch. "Busy," she said with a shrug, then added, "I can take your name in case something opens up." A pause. "You know what?" she added, flipping her notepad shut. "Never mind. We're closed to walk-ins." That's when it happened. A steaming coffee cup, meant for another table, was picked up, turned too hard, and slammed down just a little too close to the edge of the counter beside Raina. It wobbled, then tipped, splashing a few drops onto the host podium. The waitress didn't apologize, didn't reach for a towel. She just looked Raina dead in the face and said, "Oops." Raina stepped back slowly. Her eyes didn't leave the waitress's. A long, cold stare passed between them. No anger, no fear, just silence. The kind that says, "I see exactly who you are." She opened her purse and sent a single text. "I asked to speak with the manager," Raina repeated, her tone smooth as glass. The waitress exhaled sharply through her nose and didn't bother hiding the eye roll. "He's busy right now," she said flatly, as if the conversation had reached its end. Raina didn't blink. "I'll wait." The waitress's mouth twisted, like she'd bitten into something bitter. "Suit yourself." And with that, she turned her back and walked away, calling over her shoulder to a table that hadn't asked for her. She laughed too loudly at a joke no one made. Her performance wasn't for her tables. It was for the woman she thought she could dismiss. She thought she could humiliate Raina quietly. But people had noticed. A young couple 2 tables over had been watching since the moment Raina walked in. The woman's lips pressed into a line. The man fidgeted with his napkin. They didn't speak, didn't interfere, just observed, like so many others do, unsure whether to stand or stay comfortably silent. Raina caught the woman's eye, held it, then smiled. Not warmly, the kind of smile that lives somewhere between "I see you watching" and "thank you for doing absolutely nothing." The woman looked down. The man cleared his throat and reached for his water glass. Raina stood there in front of the host podium like marble, elegant, unmoving, carved from her own sense of self. She didn't raise her voice, didn't call for help, didn't scream the injustice into the room, Instead, she opened her purse. Her phone was already in hand. One quick tap, a short message, no punctuation. She did it again. She hit send. Then tucked the phone away like nothing had happened. Minutes passed. The waitress avoided her now. Didn't look at her when she walked by. Didn't check the counter, didn't pretend to care. Her shift had turned into theater, and she was trying to skip the scene. A busser walked past and looked confused by Raina still standing there. He hesitated, opened his mouth like he wanted to help, then thought better of it and disappeared into the kitchen. The buzz of low conversation rippled through the room. A spoon clinked softly against porcelain. The door to the back office remained shut, but Raina didn't flinch. She adjusted the strap on her handbag, took a small step to the side to avoid the wet ring the coffee cup had left on the podium, and crossed one arm over the other. She didn't need to shout. She had already spoken, with poise, with presence, with precision. Now she waited. Because sometimes the loudest response is the one that comes dressed in silence, and sometimes the person who sent the text owns the building. The door opened with a soft chime that barely registered at first, until everything else stopped. Conversations dulled mid-sentence. Plates paused inches from mouths. The clink of silverware against porcelain fell quiet, like even the spoons knew something was about to shift. He stepped inside like the air parted for him. Tall, mid-40s, skin rich and even, charcoal suit tailored so sharp it could slice. No logo, no flash, just weight, presence, confidence like it had been inherited, and eyes that scanned once and landed instantly on her. Raina didn't move. She was already seated now, having taken a chair near the window as if nothing had ever happened. Legs crossed, one elbow resting lightly against the table's edge, fingertips tracing the rim of her untouched water glass. Regal, rooted, entirely in control. The man crossed the room without hesitation. Every staff member along the way straightened their spines like puppets. The busser set his tray down mid-step. A hostess stood upright like she'd been rebooted. The same waitress who had dismissed Raina now froze mid-order, her notepad clutched like a lifeline. He reached Raina, leaned down, and kissed her gently on the cheek. "Sorry I'm late, babe," he said, voice low and smooth. The kind of tone that didn't need to ask for attention. It already owned the room. Raina looked up and smiled, not sweetly, not smugly, just enough to say right on time. The waitress stood paralyzed near the espresso bar, lips slightly parted, her breath shallow. She looked between them, and her entire face drained to a pale gray. Her eyes scanned the room as if hunting for a reset button. There wasn't one. From the hallway, the manager stumbled out of his office like someone had hit a silent alarm, shirt wrinkled, headset askew, panic written across his face. He tried to speak, then stopped, because what could he possibly say? The man, the owner, turned toward him slowly. "I assume you're already aware," he said. No anger in his tone, just precision, the kind of sentence that carried consequences before it even ended. The manager stammered, I didn't know she was waiting. No one told me." "She did," Raina said without looking at him. The owner nodded once. "And I'm guessing no one offered her a seat." No one answered. Silence bloomed in the room like smoke. Diners stared, then quickly looked away. One woman at the bar whispered, "Is that his wife?" Another nodded slowly, like she'd already put the whole thing together in her head and was waiting for the explosion. But it never came. Raina didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply reached for her water, took a sip, and glanced at her husband. "I was fine," she said. He smiled faintly. "I know." And the silence in the restaurant, thick, suffocating, perfect, said everything else. The owner pulled out the chair across from Raina and sat down with slow precision, the same way a conductor might lift his hands before an orchestra. No rush, no theatrics, just gravity. He glanced once toward the back, and the manager nearly tripped over himself trying to respond. "Sir, yes, of course. Just give me a second." No, the owner said quietly. Now. The entire room felt suspended in air. Diners shifted in their seats, pretending to be absorbed in their food, but every pair of eyes flicked toward the center table. A fork clinked too loudly in the distance. Someone sipped their drink just to break the tension. The manager arrived with his hands folded like a guilty schoolboy. His eyes bounced from the owner to Raina, then back again. I wasn't made aware of any issue until... Then listen, the owner interrupted, gesturing calmly to Raina. She'll explain. Raina sat poised, one arm resting lightly on the table, the other folded in her lap. She didn't adjust her tone, didn't amplify her hurt to win points. She told it like a ledger, item by item, no embellishment. She refused to seat me, told me you were full. I pointed out that the tables were open. She said they were reserved. I asked again. She told me I should try somewhere else, somewhere more my vibe. She didn't look at the waitress when she said it, but the weight of it sat in the middle of the table, undeniable. The waitress was already moving toward them, trying to clean a glass that didn't need cleaning, pretending to be busy until the silence became too loud. Then, like she had no other choice, she walked over and opened her mouth too fast. There's been a misunderstanding, she said. I didn't mean, look, she didn't look like, The owner raised one hand. Stop. The word wasn't loud, but it sliced the air. The waitress froze mid-step, halfway between defense and denial. She didn't look like what, he asked, still calm. The waitress faltered. I just meant she didn't seem like someone who'd normally eat here, that's all. The owner let the words hang. Then he leaned back slightly and glanced at Raina, then back to the waitress. His voice dropped an octave. She eats here more than anyone else. The waitress didn't speak. The manager turned to stone. She was here before you, the owner continued. Before half the staff. You served food she helped pick out. The wine list, that's hers. The art on the back wall, she chose it. No one moved. The staff stood still, some holding trays, others frozen mid-step. Diners stopped pretending to not listen. Now they stared openly, drinks untouched, bites paused mid-air. The owner stood slowly, looked at the manager, then at the waitress. Apologize. The waitress opened her mouth, but no words came. She doesn't need it, Raina said finally, her voice cutting gently through the weight in the air. But you do. And that landed harder than anything. The new photo went up on a Monday morning, just before the lunch rush. It was larger than the others, centered perfectly on the exposed brick wall, where the restaurant displayed its founding moments, framed in gold like it belonged in a museum. The lighting had been adjusted slightly, just enough to give it a subtle spotlight. In the image, Raina stood in the kitchen with the owner beside her, both of them smiling, sleeves rolled up, flower on their arms. She wasn't in silk or heels, just a plain apron, head tilted toward him, joy radiating through the lens. Below the photo, a small brass plaque had been added. The reason this place exists. Nobody explained it to the staff. Nobody needed to. The message was clear. The waitress was gone. No formal announcement. No dramatic send-off. Her name was quietly removed from the schedule, her apron handed to someone else. The other staff members noticed the change in the air, not just in personnel, but in posture, in how they greeted new guests, in how long they held eye contact, in how quickly they stopped assuming. Raina didn't demand it. She didn't micromanage. She didn't parade her presence like ownership. She was simply around, sometimes dining with her husband, sometimes reviewing wine lists, sometimes offering quiet input on the seasonal menu. A nod here, a taste test there. Her presence was soft, but unmistakable. She had become the quiet center of the room. Guests began to ask about the photo. Is that the owner's wife? Is she a chef? Did she used to run this place? The staff was trained to answer with a smile. She's the one who gave it a soul. Not everyone knew who she was, and that was fine. Sometimes a new guest would walk in and overlook her entirely, assume she was just another customer, sitting alone with her menu and her silence. Sometimes they'd test the edges of her presence, offer her the worst table, hand her the wrong menu, delay her order like it didn't matter. And every time she'd simply watch, not with malice, just with clarity. She didn't need to raise her voice anymore. The restaurant carried her voice now, in the color of the walls, in the way the wine was paired, in the jazz that played on Tuesday evenings. It was hers, not because of paperwork, but because of principle. Because she had been denied a table, and instead of walking away, she built one into the foundation. Now, even those who didn't recognize her were sitting in a space she made possible. She didn't need to be known to be powerful. She just had to be seen. And those who looked close enough always understood. She was never just in the restaurant. She was the restaurant.